This video is brought to you by Brilliant. Make learning one of your New Year's resolutions and start learning about science, math, engineering, computer science, and so much more thanks to Brilliant's accessible and interactive courses. Click below to try it for free or be among the first 200 to sign up and get a 20% discount on an annual subscription. More details after the video. Gamers, hello and welcome to the very last official This Week in Video Games for 2023. This show is business as usual, the same format and structure as all the others, but next week we do our end of year news wrap up, looking back at the biggest news stories and releases that define 2023, a year that will go down as one of the best years in the history of video games for people who play games, but also probably the worst year for the people making games. Let's not get ahead of ourselves though, we'll talk about all that next week. Alright, so this is true. The original draft of this intro had a bit about how there wasn't too much going on this week as the year was winding down and yada yada. A lean and thrifty show, I called it. And then the Insomniac hack happened. Okay, so this is a tricky one to cover. Let's start with the basics first. A little while ago, Insomniac, the team behind Ratchet & Clank and Spider-Man, were hacked in a ransomware attack. The hackers demanded millions of dollars and they threatened that if Sony didn't pay up, the hackers would release a trove of sensitive information, including personal data for employees, as well as information about in-development projects, including things like the upcoming Wolverine game. Well, today the hackers made good on their promise, releasing a trove of sensitive employee data and a lot of information about upcoming Insomniac projects, including Wolverine, but also plenty of others. It includes the full plot of the Wolverine game, its cast of characters. It even includes a bootable build of the Wolverine game that has not been cracked open yet, as it requires a dev kit to play, but you have to assume that people are already working on that, and they'll no doubt figure it out at some point. So right off the top, I want to say this fucking sucks. Every hack or leak is different, spilling out different types of information across the internet. Earlier this year, Microsoft accidentally uploaded their plans for a mid-gen console refresh, their plans for a next-gen console, and their planned slate of upcoming titles. Sony recently forgot to redact some sensitive information, making public the development costs of games like Horizon Forbidden West and The Last of Us Part 2. The Nvidia leak was one of the largest in history, revealing a ton of unannounced projects, many of which ended up not being real, but many were. The famous Nintendo Giga leak of 2018 revealed gigabytes worth of sensitive Nintendo information, including some employee data. Most recently, the GTA 6 hack resulted in game files and footage being uploaded and shared widely, robbing Rockstar of the chance to reveal their game on their own terms, and we all surely remember the plot leaks for The Last of Us Part 2, an event that permanently tilted the entire conversation around that game. So every leak is different, but some of them suck more than others, and this one feels like it really sucks. Insomniac are an incredibly talented and hardworking studio who put out top-tier games free of in-game cash shops. Artistically and commercially, Insomniac are an S-tier outfit, and it really sucks to see their work revealed in this way. Because you can go and see Wolverine gameplay right now, but it's not ready to be shown, and Insomniac will now never get the chance to reveal their game in the way that they wanted to, and that really blows. Arguably, the most important part of this hack is the leaking of employee data. I mean, no matter how you slice it, that is just dangerous, and I think it should be at the forefront of how we talk about this hack, because as exciting as it is to learn about Insomniac's upcoming slate of games, it ultimately comes from a source who willingly and deliberately put Insomniac staff in harm's way by revealing their personal information in an effort to extort Sony into giving them money. The situation has led to a lot of discourse about how the games media should cover these leaks, since some outlets like Kinda Funny, Second Wind, and GameSpot have said that they won't cover the leaks content at all, while other outlets such as The Verge, IGN, and Eurogamer are covering some of the contents. None of these outlets are covering story or gameplay spoilers for Wolverine, since that's an obvious red line that the games media rarely cross. Story spoilers often get out before they should, and games media and content creators typically don't cover them because they respect the creative endeavor that is making a video game. Sure, spoilers are newsworthy, absolutely, but it's not the kind of news that the vast majority of outlets and content creators want to cover, and it's a good thing that our industry functions that way. The other stuff, like unannounced games or commercial partnerships or sales data, that stuff is much more of a grey area. Is it bad that The Verge are listing the slate of upcoming Insomniac games? Is it distasteful for Eurogamer to cover internal corporate strategy documents that emerge from this hack? Is it wrong that IGN are revealing details about a potential exclusivity deal for X-Men characters, locking them down on Sony's hardware the same way that Spider-Man has been exclusive there since Insomniac's first Spidey game? See, that last one really hits home, right? Like it or not, no matter how that information came to light, that is news, and if the games media is going to be a functional journalistic entity and not just enthusiast press, then we have an obligation to cover at least some of the details emerging from this hack. Shouldn't people who own a PC, a Switch, or an Xbox know that if there are to be any X-Men games in the future, that they won't be coming to their platforms? The answer to that question is surely yes. There's also the matter of precedent. If you choose to not cover salient, newsworthy details from one hack or leak, how can you reasonably cover the next? Sure, the Xbox leak earlier this year was a leak and not a hack, and it didn't endanger the safety of Xbox staff, but it still spoiled the hard work of Xbox engineers, it spoiled a number of unannounced projects on Bethesda's slate, and it also revealed a huge amount of commercial in-confidence information about Microsoft's internal planning and deliberations. All of this stuff was covered without any hesitation from the games media, myself included. How then can we turn around and not cover very similar information, even if the way that information was obtained was malicious instead of accidental? Finally, there's a lens of pragmatism that must be applied. I can sit here and pretend that I don't know what Insomniac are working on for the next 10 years, or how much profit Ratchet & Clank made, but the truth is, I do know that now. If I'm not going to discuss it, how long do I not discuss it for? Do I need to wait 4 years for Insomniac to announce their next project before I can start talking about it? Is commentary about the success of Sony's PC strategy forever going to omit the now public sales data that came out of this hack? In the age of social media, the diffusing of information happens regardless of whether or not media and content creators choose to cover it, and so when information is both public and newsworthy, it can't be the role of outlets and content creators to pretend that that information isn't out there. I think the best thing they can do is apply their expertise, their judgment, and their compassion to report that news fairly, accurately, and with the right context that reminds people what that information means and where that information came from. So here's what I'm going to do. I will talk about some of this stuff in the future because it would be disingenuous of me not to do so, but I don't want to talk about it now because frankly, the maliciousness of this hack and the danger it's posed to Insomniac staff is what I think matters most. If you want to find out what games Insomniac are making next, you will find that in a heartbeat. Google will auto-complete the search for you when you so much as look at the search bar. For me though, I'm happy to take a beat and focus on the risk that this hack poses to Insomniac's people, because I think that when that fact is top of mind, it really contextualizes the human cost that accompanies all of this news about superhero video games that may or may not release over the coming 10+ years. So that is all I have to say about that for now, but unfortunately for Sony, there's a lot more bad news for them this week. As shitty a week as it was for Insomniac, they were not the only Sony studio going through it, because this week Naughty Dog bit the bullet and officially cancelled that big online multiplayer title they've been hyping up for the past few years. So as you may have heard, Naughty Dog have been working on a live service multiplayer title. It was based on the Factions multiplayer mode from The Last of Us 1, which came bundled with the PS3 version of the game, but was notably absent in the recent Part 1 remaster. One of the unspoken justifications for its absence was the idea that you'll get a better version of Factions very soon when Naughty Dog release their multiplayer title. Their push to make this live service title may have been a creative one, but maybe not. Under Jim Ryan's leadership, Sony pivoted hard towards live services, greenlighting a total of 12 of them and devoting more than half of Sony's research and development budget to live service projects. That is a massive change for an organization that built its empire on high-quality, cinematic single-player action games. From the PS3 onward, but in particular the PS4 era where Sony solidified their gains and absolutely trounced Microsoft, the offline single-player game has been the rock on which Sony's church was built, so for them to step away from that was always going to be a huge gamble, and a very ill-advised one, as anyone with any common sense would tell you, because we've all seen how this goes when successful single-player studios are forced to make some live service bullshit to keep the bean counters and shareholders happy. BioWare's Anthem is definitely one of the more notable examples. That studio had no business making that game, but they did it anyway and paid a terrible price for it. Fallout 76 was another, still the most disastrously bad AAA release in the history history of video games. Wolfenstein Youngblood was a smaller scale catastrophe, but a catastrophe nonetheless. Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics managed to achieve the impossible when they found a way to lose money with the Avengers franchise at a time when the MCU was at the absolute peak of its power. Platinum Games' foray into live service was so short-lived that you probably forgot entirely that Babylon's Fall even existed, and Arcane's Redfall stands out as one of the biggest disappointments and saddest stories of 2023. A great studio like that brought low by Bethesda's management, forcing them to make a multiplayer live service co-op shooter, because that obviously plays to Arcane's strengths. There are dozens more examples like this I could list, but you get the picture. The same way that the pivot to video ruined a massive chunk of the media business, the pivot to live service has wrought absolute havoc across vast swathes of game development. There was a chance that Naughty Dog could have followed all those other studios off the same cliff, but this week they announced a last-minute course correction, cancelling outright their live service multiplayer game and recommitting themselves to the single-player experiences that are their bread and butter. Quote, "We realize many of you have been anticipating news around the project that we've been calling The Last of Us Online. There's no easy way to say this. We've made the incredibly difficult decision to stop development on that game. The multiplayer team has been in pre-production with this game since we were working on The Last of Us Part 2, crafting an experience we felt was unique and had tremendous potential. As the multiplayer team iterated on their concept for The Last of Us Online during this time, their vision crystallized, the gameplay got more refined and satisfying, and we were enthusiastic about the direction in which we were headed. In ramping up to full production, the massive scope of our ambition became clear. To release and support The Last of Us Online, we'd have to put all of our studio's resources behind supporting post-launch content for years to come, severely impacting development on future single-player games. So we had two paths in front of us: become a solely live service game studio, or continue to focus on single-player narrative games that have defined Naughty Dog's heritage." End quote. Pretty big, but not altogether surprising. Some months back, Jason Schreier of Bloomberg reported that The Last of Us Online had hit the rocks big time after newly acquired Sony studio Bungie, still feels very weird to say that, they visited Naughty Dog to play their game, and Bungie were like, nah. They reportedly poo-pooed Naughty Dog's work, saying that it didn't have the live service legs needed to keep it going, and Sony listened, immediately moving resources away from that project as they figured out what to do next. Surely there was some frantic behind-the-scenes work from people to keep this project alive, as the years of work that went into The Last of Us Online are now nothing more than a tax write-off for Sony Interactive Entertainment. So I must say, I find Naughty Dog's framing of this cancellation a little strange. The way it's presented, it seems as though Naughty Dog's ambition ballooned to the point where the only way that this project could be supported in the long term was through a whole of studio effort, transforming Naughty Dog into a live service operation like Respawn, Epic, or Bungie. But like, how did it ever get to that point? Like, obviously, no serious person would have ever entertained the idea that Naughty Dog should become a live service only studio. So if that eventually did become the goal, did that happen by accident? Who at the top couldn't see which way the wind was blowing on this, failing to step in early to rescope the project? How did it ever become a question of Naughty Dog, one of the preeminent single-player studios, abandoning single-player games? I don't know, man, something about this doesn't sound right, and I wonder if this framing doesn't speak to a larger war going on within Sony and its studios right now, as Sony itself aims to pivot away from its previously held live service ambitions. Because that's what Sony are doing. A few weeks ago, Sony revealed that they had delayed more than half of their live service portfolio, and the way it was framed made it less than certain that those projects would ever see the light of day. Jim Ryan is very soon to be out the door, his influence no doubt waning in the final weeks of his job. Are his replacements trying to undo some of Ryan's biggest strategic plays? It's possible that they're just trying to de-risk things, as the entire live service segment is a lot more choppy right now than it's ever been. Case in point, Bungie, the developer who, ironically enough, sunk Naughty Dog's live service ambitions. Bungie have been going through it lately, suffering a catastrophic drop-off in player engagement for Destiny 2 that prompted management to sack nearly 100 staff, including frontline community managers, veteran dev talent, and legendary composer Michael Salvatore. At the time, Bungie didn't provide much in the way of explanation, and they still haven't really, but luckily Rebecca Valentine of IGN did some behind-the-scenes deep dive reporting that cast these headcount changes in a whole new light. According to Valentine, Bungie is a fully independent subsidiary of Sony, with Bungie maintaining a majority for voting purposes, but that power structure may not last forever. According to Valentine's sources, that split board structure is dependent on Bungie meeting certain success criteria, and if Bungie falls short on those goals too much, Sony are able to dissolve the board and take full control of the company. The problem is that Bungie are struggling to keep their head above water right now. Lightfall kind of bombed, at least post the initial strong sales. The seasonal model is not keeping players engaged at the moment, and the death of the PvP side of the game has meant Bungie can't fall back on that as a means of player retention. Bungie are investing big dollars in their upcoming extraction shooter Marathon, and they've also delayed the final shape to June of next year, meaning that cash flow between now and then is going to be very low, creating an omnipresent risk that Sony could trigger that dissolution clause and take over. That is why Pete Parsons, Bungie's CEO, made the headcount reductions. It was not at the direction of Sony, but rather a Bungie leadership decision to avoid falling below the performance thresholds. In addition to this, Bungie has initiated a vast cost-cutting campaign, cutting back on travel, rewards programs, events, bonuses, you name it. If there's $1 to be saved, then Bungie is reaching for it. Valentine sources say that this has resulted in morale being at an all-time low at the studio, some describing it as soul-crushing, and apparently senior leaders are refusing to rule out the possibility of more job cuts in the future. One interesting thing to note, because this anecdote always rears its head in these sorts of stories, I'll read it out. Quote, employees in one department recalled a post-layoffs Q&A session where a department head was asked if leadership taking salary cuts to prevent layoffs had been considered, only to respond that Bungie was not that type of company, end quote. Ah yes, what a surprise. Valentine would go on to discuss quality assurance and how it's perceived as increasingly vulnerable in all of this. Again, a very familiar story since QA is often the first head on the chopping block when it comes to cuts, even though QA is essential to game development. She concludes by saying that the pressure is very much on Bungie's leadership to deliver if they plan to keep the studio's independence, but it's very unclear how they're going to be able to dig the company out of this current predicament. Alright, so that's the end of Sony's very, very shitty week. Let's now turn to Epic Games, who this week notched a big victory royale over one of their arch nemesis, Google. A few weeks ago, Epic kicked off their antitrust lawsuit against Google, very similar to the one that they brought against Apple but lost. The basic thrust of their claim is that both Apple and Google engage in anti-competitive behavior by maintaining outsized market share and wielding that to force out competing storefronts, payment platforms, and more. Epic famously kicked off this battle years ago when they updated the Fortnite app to allow payments directly to Epic, bypassing the 30% cut demanded by Apple and Google through the app and Play stores respectively. Apple and Google responded by delisting Fortnite immediately, and all these years later, it's still not back up on either platform as Epic continue their legal battle. Now, to probably explain all of the intricacies of this in a single video would be impossible, but the very short summary is that Epic argued that Google's App Store, combined with its singular payments platform option, was monopolistic. And furthermore, Google's sweetheart deals with certain game and app publishers were anti-competitive since they stifled the creation of alternative app stores and payment processors. The jury agreed with this. It took them just a couple of hours to answer every question in Epic's favor, essentially ruling that Google were maintaining a monopoly and misusing their power whilst doing so. So that was last week, and that was just round one in a process that would likely drag on for years in the appeals courts, or so we thought. Separate to this, Google was being sued by all 50 US states for something similar to what Epic was suing them for, namely a monopoly on payments made through the Google Play ecosystem. As I was writing this very block, the news broke that Google had settled that lawsuit, that it will pay a $700 million settlement, and most importantly, it will allow apps to charge consumers directly without having to use Google as the sole payments platform. It sounds like a win until you read the fine print, where it specifies that Google can still charge up to 26% for each transaction that happens on any app downloaded from the Google Play storefront, even if Google are themselves not facilitating that payment. If that's too complicated, here's the TLDR. Google can still collect their pound of flesh. Tim Sweeney of Epic Games is not at all happy about it and plans to continue his crusade to dismantle these payment platform monopolies. I don't agree with everything Tim Sweeney says or does, but it does seem like he's fighting the good fight here, and in like 3 or 4 years' time, maybe we might find out if he's won. Until then, I'll keep you posted on the legal blow-by-blows. Damn man, my head hurts after that story. Can we do something simple now? Okay, how about this? They're making a Death Stranding movie. Doesn't get more straightforward than that now, does it? It's a very unsurprising story in many aspects, given Kojima's penchant for cinema. Man would absolutely be a movie director if he wasn't trapped in a game maker's body. I guess it is a little surprising that after literally decades of everyone pleading for a Metal Gear movie, the first actual Kojima movie we get is for his weird, creepy walking sim that some perverts like myself can't get enough of, but most people just find really dull and boring. Still, Kojima has got himself a heck of a partner for this endeavor, A24. They're the studio that's been producing the most avant-garde Hollywood cinema for the past decade, a decade that's been dominated by the death throes of the MCU and the shambling undead corpse of the Snyderverse. Kojima announced this partnership on Twitter and followed up with a blog post, and you could really feel his enthusiasm for the project. Quote, A24 was born into this world about 10 years ago. Their presence is singular within the industry. They are like no other. The films they are delivering to the world are high in quality and very innovative. I've been attracted to their creations, and they have even inspired my own work. Their innovative approach to storytelling aligns with what Kojima Productions has been doing the last 8 years. Now we are making a Death Stranding movie together. There are a lot of game adaptation films out there, but what we are creating is not just a direct translation of the game. The intention is that our audience will not only be fans of the games, but our film will be for anyone who loves cinema. We are creating a Death Stranding universe that has never been seen before, achievable only through the medium of film. It will be born, end quote. That is one hell of a Kojima quote right there. To be honest, you can absolutely sign me the hell up for this. A24 are legit filmmakers, and Kojima's been dying to make a film his whole life. The Death Stranding IP is perfectly weird enough to give everyone some room to flex, producing something wholly unexpected and original. I very much hope this doesn't end up as one of those projects that gets announced and then stays in development hell for 6 years and is quietly cancelled via press release. Don't let us down, Kojima. This sounds really cool. The last time we saw Kojima was at the Game Awards, an event that was meant to be a celebration of game makers and their achievements, but turned into somewhat of a farce as award recipients had roughly 30 seconds to say their thanks before being ushered off stage, and that's if they were lucky enough to get the chance to speak in the first place, as many awards were handed out off stage. Many people, myself included, criticized the event handling things this way, while others have been taking matters into their own hands, giving a microphone to the developers who were rudely denied one on their big night. Rebecca Valentine, again of IGN, reached out to award winners to give them their chance to use IGN's platform to speak, and a number of them took Valentine up on the offer. Terry Bullinger led his team to win Best Indie with Sea of Stars, and among other things, he had this to say, quote, "Thank you so much. I've been outspoken throughout the development that Sea of Stars is a game that is incredibly personal to me. It would be hard to put into words how much it means that the team allowed me to share this vision and then poured themselves into it to such an extent. That is something I will never forget. We are all so lucky to do what we love, and I try to keep that reminder close every day that I have the privilege to make games," end quote. Tachia won the Games for Impact Award, and creative director Phil Criffo responded on behalf of his team, quote, "This award is not just a celebration of what we made, it is fuel to keep going and to keep telling stories that are deeply ours, believing they will keep resonating with all of you," end quote. Separate from all of this, Larian boss Swen Vinke took to Twitter to deliver the award speech that he would have given out had he had more than 30 seconds. It's 16 tweets long, so it's impossible to recount here, but it's moving and bittersweet because as lovely as it is to hear him say his piece, it's also sad to know that he didn't get the chance to do that when the occasion called for it. I'll leave a link to Swen's Twitter thread below. I very much hope Jeff Keighley and his team are implementing some big changes for next year. Switching gears now, last week we covered the closure of Free Radical Design, the recently reformed studio who were working on a reboot of the TimeSplitters franchise. With that studio's closure, the project is now dead, and as a result, a bunch of former staff are saying fuck it, and they're spilling the tea on what the project was and might have been had it seen a full release. The leak is in the form of an interview with an anonymous former staffer, and it says the game was still quite a ways from release, at least 2 years or more. Apparently, and rather disappointingly, it started out its life as a Fortnite clone, but that idea was eventually scrapped, with it pivoting back to a more classic arena-style shooter. There was a sudden jump from Unreal Engine 4 to 5 when that engine was announced, and that apparently caused massive problems for the project, necessitating the entire game to effectively be rebuilt. As for whether or not the project might find a second lease on life with another studio, this anonymous source says that is very unlikely. The project is definitely cancelled for now, so unless Embracer swing back around toward it and staff it up, then it's not coming back. But given that Embracer are bailing as much headcount over the side as they can right now, TimeSplitters seems to be well and truly kaput. And finally, one very sad story to finish on. This week saw the passing of James McCaffrey, accomplished screen actor with a career spanning decades. but we would know him best as the voice of Max Payne and more recently Alex Casey in Alan Wake 2. He was a truly iconic presence in those games, his gravelly voice chewing every bit of the scenery as though he was born to play film noir roles. He passed away this week after a battle with cancer, age 65. Absolutely no age at all to go. He will be greatly missed. A quick lightning round to finish off. Baldur's Gate 3 is the highest selling game on Xbox. That's according to Larian's head of publishing, who tweeted out his thanks for the result, and of course his thanks to Xbox fans for being so patient. It's an unsurprising sales figure given the quality of the title and its recent Game of the Year gong. Xbots, let me know in the comments below how you're finding it. I've already experienced it myself, so now I need to live vicariously through you people. If you are a more spendthrifty Xbot who says to yourself, I'll just wait for Baldur's Gate 3 to come to Game Pass, thank you very much, then I have got some bad news for you. Larian boss Swen Vinke told IGN, quote, "Oh, we always said from the get-go it wasn't going to be on Game Pass. It's not going to be on Game Pass," end quote. He'd go on to provide his rationale, quote, "We made a big game, so I think there's a fair price to be paid for that, and I think that's okay. We don't charge you any microtransactions on top of it, so you get what you pay for. Upfront is a big, meaty game, so I think it should be able to exist as it is. That is what allows us to continue making other games," end quote. Couldn't agree more, Swen. Keep it up, my dude. With the Blade game now being officially revealed, we're learning little tidbits about it, like for example, how long Arcane Leon have been working on it. A LinkedIn post spotted by Clobril suggests that Arcane have been on the title since 2022, which would make perfect sense since they shipped Deathloop in October of 2021. Based on that timeline, that would still put Blade fairly early in its production cycle, and we're unlikely to see it hitting shelves anytime before 2026. Speaking of Bethesda, Stephen Totillo of Axios sat down for a wide-ranging interview with Disney's head of gaming, Sean Shoptaw. In it, they discussed everything from Star Wars to Spider-Man to the upcoming Indiana Jones game currently in development at Machine Games, the team behind the recent Wolfenstein trilogy. When asked about the recent pivot to make Indie an Xbox exclusive after Bethesda was acquired by Microsoft, Shoptaw was pretty forthright, quote, "Xbox still being one of the biggest marketplaces for games, we didn't feel like we were going to be overly exclusionary. We felt like it was still going to reach a broad set of folks, and we felt financially and strategically for the game that made sense at the time," end quote. I mean, it's partly true, but at the same time, it would have been nice to have seen Indie on all platforms, but hey, it would have been nice to see Spidey on all platforms too. But no way was Sony ever going to let that happen. And finally, could the absolutely legendary plastic guitars from the likes of Rock Band and Guitar Hero be making a return? PDP are a peripherals manufacturer, and they put up a cheeky tweet that read, quote, "Rock on this January," end quote. It featured a very handsome looking guitar silhouette. Someone responded being like, "Guys, don't get our hopes up, this could be a troll," and PDP were all like, quote, "There's a 100% chance this is real," end quote. As for what game the guitar will be used for, it's almost certain to be the newly launched Fortnite Festival, a game which was made by Rock Band developer Harmonix after they were acquired by Epic. If playing Fortnite is the price we all have to pay to see Rock Band and the peripherals come back, then I will dance with that devil in the pale moonlight and anywhere else they want me to dance. I never managed to do Fire and Flames on Expert, but in 2024, thanks to Tim Sweeney, I may just get my shot. So what got announced or delayed this week? Well, very little, so 3 very quick things to canter through. Atomic Heart's next DLC has been revealed. It's called Trapped in Limbo, and it will launch on February 6th of next year. Loot River was and is an excellent top-down action game with a hint of Tetris thrown in. It came out last year on other platforms, but arrived on PlayStation just yesterday. And finally, Expeditions, a Mudrunner game, has been revealed by Saber Interactive. From the team that brought you both SnowRunner and Mudrunner, this is a 4-wheel drive adventure that sees you making your way through the wilderness to survey hard-to-reach locations. I've never played one of these games before, but everyone says they're awesome, and this one arrives March 6th next year. So what came out last week? Well, it was a quiet week to be sure, the last proper week of releases for the year. Luckily, there was more than one strong release, including one very big surprise in the mix that kind of blew everyone away, actually. Before that though, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus arrived for PlayStation and PC, a gorgeously animated anime fighter featuring Fall Guys-style lobby challenges when you want to kick back between the more stressful bouts. Grand Blue has done extremely well for itself, debuting at a mighty 86 on OpenCritic. Mitch Saltzman is IGN's resident fighting games dude, and he loved it, scoring it a 9 out of 10 and saying, quote, "Grand Blue Fantasy Versus Rising fully realizes the potential that the vanilla game showed back in 2020. This is a feature-rich and absolutely gorgeous 2D anime fighter with a deep roster of 28 fantastic characters, great netcode, and well-implemented gameplay tweaks that reinvigorate the already exciting fighting fighting system, end quote. Most other critic reviews had similar commentary, but user reviews on Steam paint a slightly different picture. There it's sitting at a very positive 80%, with almost all of the negative reviews pointing to two things. The first is regional pricing, as the game apparently has a pretty stiff price point in a number of regions, and the other thing is regional servers. Basically, if you're anywhere outside of Asia, North America, or Europe, you're fresh out of luck, as the latency will seriously degrade your overall experience. Bit of a shame, but at the same time, it's kind of a niche title, so I can understand the publisher being a little more restrained in their server rollouts. Hopefully the game finds a strong following so that more server locations can be open up soon. House Flipper 2 arrived, and I won't lie, I wouldn't have predicted scores this high. On Steam, it's sitting at a very positive 82%, which is a great result, but it's even better over on OpenCritic, where the title debuted at a mighty 84. God as a Geek really enjoyed it, scoring at an 8.5 and saying, quote, "In a year dominated by Metroidvanias, huge open worlds, and big budget action, House Flipper 2 is a refreshingly joyous, relaxing experience," end quote. And Tech Raptor was similarly impressed, scoring at a 9 out of 10 and saying, quote, "House Flipper 2 keeps a similar formula to the first game, but with upgraded graphics, frame story, and voice acting, keeps it feeling fresh," end quote. Only other major release for the week was Asgard's Wrath 2, sequel to what was arguably the definitive RPG experience. Now, Meta published this one, in fact, they actually own the studio, and they'd been hyping it up, which is what you'd expect them to do since this is their IP. Based on the success of the first game, I think everyone was expecting it to be good, but I don't think anyone was expecting it to be literally one of the best games of the year. That's not hyperbole, by the way. Asgard's Wrath 2 debuted on OpenCritic at a mighty 93. This makes Asgard's Wrath 2 the third highest rated game of the year after Tears of the Kingdom and Baldur's Gate 3, both of which sit at 96. This is an incredible result for what is the last major release of 2023, and certainly the first major marquee VR release in a hot minute. The last time we saw anything close to this on the VR scene was Half-Life Alyx, which also sits at a mighty 93 on OpenCritic. IGN scored Asgard's Wrath a perfect 10, quote, "Asgard's Wrath 2 is an open-world action RPG that sets a new gold standard for VR and competes with the best anywhere," end quote. Game Rant, 4.5 stars, quote, "Asgard's Wrath 2 is the killer app that MetaQuest 3 early adopters have been waiting for, an expansive VR experience with a stunning amount of depth," end quote. And God as a Geek with a 9 out of 10 saying, quote, "Asgard's Wrath 2 takes full advantage of the technology on offer and is one of the best VR titles I've ever had the joy of playing," end quote. Do note that this is a campaign of at least 60 hours long, upwards of 130 hours for completionists. So if this at all interests you, then make sure you're ready to have a headset strapped onto your face for a very, very long time. So what's coming out this week? Nada. That's what, like literally nothing. I mean, it's the week before Christmas, so developers are naturally disinclined to ship their games when they're about to go on holidays. The only thing to shout out is a Resident Evil 4 remake port for Mac and also iOS devices. Not sure why you want to play RE4 Remake on your phone, but hey, for some reason, Apple decided to will it into existence, and so there it is. It'll be live on the App Store sometime today. If you do happen to download it, please let me know how it runs. I'm going to be very interested to see how they squeeze one of the best looking games of the year onto a phone. Alright, before I intro this next one, watch this. Isn't that the sickest thing you have ever seen? This is V.A Proxy, a game I chanced upon recently when I saw a clip of a character parrying the floor. It was part of the movement tech in the game where you could parry at the precise moment of landing to give yourself a movement boost. I was immediately like, alright, this looks pretty sick. It was only when I started looking into it that I found out that parrying the floor is the least impressive parry you are capable of. For what other game will let you parry a nuke? Outside of that though, this just looks fucking cool. The art looks so scrappy but so fitting for the setting. Pace and verticality channel Devil May Cry, and the giant mechanized bosses have a distinct Nier Automata flair. It just looks so stylish and cool and totally unique, and I really love it. V.A Proxy is a true indie in every sense of the word. It's actually a Patreon project that you can fund directly should you be interested. I'll leave a link to that below the like button. I'll also leave a link to my Steam Curator page where I've profiled V.A Proxy, as well as all the other put this on your radar stuff I've recently covered. If you've got a sec, do be sure to wishlist this game, as that always helps indie developers out in a big way, just like clicking the like button on a YouTube video helps out the YouTuber. Hint hint, nudge nudge. Sort of free stuff time now, and I gotta admit I let you guys down. Last week I hyped up the mystery Epic giveaway, saying that when Epic keep it under wraps it usually means they're giving away something good. But what do we end up getting? Destiny 2, ew, gross. Am I right, gamers? See, I'm just like you guys. To be fair, the Legacy Collection does contain 2 expansions that should be free but aren't, Shadowkeep and Beyond Light, as well as 1 expansion that I still think is worth the price of admission, that being the Witch Queen. Regardless, you can't look a gift horse in the mouth. The whole thing is free, the whole package is free, and the perfect way to begin your Destiny 2 journey, just as Destiny itself prepares to wrap up its first major saga. As for the other giveaway from Epic this week, that too is a mystery, and next week we won't be doing a regular news show, as I'll be doing the end of year news wrap up, so be sure to check in on this one for yourself in case they've got something good. Outside of that, the only other shout this week is for PS Plus Extra and Premium. It continues the trend of being not super great. I mean, it's got GTA 5, great. You're gonna tell me we don't all already own 6 copies of GTA 5? Stranger of Paradise is, however, a more exciting addition, a very solid Final Fantasy themed Souls-like from Team Ninja that features excellent combat and a healthy dosage of chaos. My personal pick is Metal Hellsinger, a rhythm-based first-person shooter, love that, and Tinykin is excellent if you're looking for some Pikmin-inspired fun, but don't have the cash to shell out for Pikmin 4. Okay, I'm gonna be real with you, we usually do a feel-good story for the week here, but the Insomniac stuff broke super late, and we have been rushing to get in before wrapping the show. I'm not joking when I say that we had a 5-minute window to finalize this, so please forgive me for no feel-good story, and please forgive the brevity of this goodbye. Hit like on the video, subscribe to the channel, ding the notification bell. Thank you very much for watching, and a big thanks to this week's sponsor, Brilliant! New Year's Eve is just around the corner, so it's time to start thinking about those New Year's resolutions. Sure, we got the old reliable get fit, get in shape, always an oldie but a goodie, even if I, for one, rarely follow through on it. Eating better is also a worthwhile goal. It is not appropriate that the people at the local pizza place know the sound of my voice, okay? I should have to introduce myself when I call. Clearly, I have let things get out of control. What we put into our bodies is, of course, very important. But let me ask you this. What about a New Year's resolution to start putting better stuff into your brain? Sure, you can stuff it full of Reddit posts and gacha mobile games, but what if you took just a few minutes each day to learn something interesting, something useful, something that will broaden your horizons? If that interests you, then can I suggest you check out this video's sponsor, Brilliant. Now, you might have heard of Brilliant. They provide really accessible, really interactive ways to learn about things like science, mathematics, engineering, computer science, and so much more. It's really interesting to me because growing up, I was always drawn to the arts, and I kind of shut my brain off to a lot of this STEM stuff. But the older I got, I was like, I would really like to understand exactly how GPS works, not because I need to know, just because it's interesting to know. That's where Brilliant comes in. They have courses big and small, simple and in-depth, all of them illuminating something that seemed at first impenetrable, but really you just needed someone to explain it to you properly. Or you needed to learn by doing, which is another thing Brilliant excels at, since its courses almost always contain some interactive element that'll let you apply and test your learning on the spot. This stuff isn't just interesting, it can be really useful. If you work in data programming, for example, then the stuff you learn here can help you be better at your job. And just having a sharper, more curious mind is going to hold you in good stead no matter what you're doing. One thing I really like is that Brilliant kind of gamifies your learning, breaking your progress down into manageable chunks, giving you experience points and achievements for completing courses, and gradually upping the complexity as you get more proficient in a topic. Best of all, they have a mobile app, allowing you to log in and start learning whenever you've got a spare 5 or 10 minutes free. Sure, you could boot up a mobile game, and I absolutely do, but now I also boot up Brilliant from time to time. I find it just as fun and interesting, and it's actually useful. You can try Brilliant for free for 30 days, absolutely no cost, but if you do want to get an annual subscription, the first 200 people who subscribe will get 20% off their annual subscription. To sign up, visit brilliant.org/skillup, start learning free for 30 days, or get 20% off your annual subscription for the first 200 signups only over at brilliant.org/skillup. Thanks Brilliant for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.